Yes. So basically, it's where MULIKA UBAKAJI campaign is coming from, and as I said, we are now a consortium of almost 30 organizations. We have established a strategy which was defined by all the organizations in the course of last year until we have the official launch on the 8th of December 2021 with the participation of all members of the MULIKA UBAKAJI consortium, as I said, 28 organizations so far, and looking at enlarging as well, because we are convinced that the more we are, the more impact we can make on this issue, and the more contribution we can have, because you can imagine with 28 organizations on board, there is quite a lot of skill, quite a lot of services that can be provided by different organizations. There are organizations which are dealing with the grassroots human rights defenders, and therefore mobilizing community, advocating for this issue, involving international community. There are organizations which are providing legal support. There are organizations which are able to provide shelter to victims. There are organizations which are providing psychosocial support. So there is all range of activities that can be covered already by this group of organizations. And as we said, the campaign was launched in December 2021, so it's a relatively new initiative, but I think that we are already seeing some good result, at least in terms of support to victims, in terms of sensitizing community, in terms of mobilizing also community. We are looking also at mobilizing more resources, which may be a little challenging, but we believe that also with your help, the help of the media, this message will be further spread and will probably find also more supported to this initiative. So one of the key actors is also the media, clearly. There are so many actors that you can imagine, from the police services to the judiciary to the supporting health facilities, shelter activity facilities, as I mentioned earlier. So, but the media clearly are instrumental to also propagate the message and make people and victims aware of this problem. And the problem, when we are talking about sexual gender-based violence, we are thinking mostly about women, but that's not the case only. It is mostly the case, we have to say, but victims of rape and defilement are also men, young children, and this is an issue that deserves the attention of the entire community, and the victims deserve the support of the entire community. This thing cannot anymore go unreported and hidden and thrown under the carpet and forgotten. The problem is big. We have been also working on a scenario building exercise. We have been looking at what shall we expect from the next general elections. We cannot discount concerns because of past experience. We have seen violence, we have seen victims, we have seen number of people displaced, number of people killed, and number of people raped, number of people violated. We have to look at it also in that perspective. We all hope we'll have a peaceful August and the way forward, but we can also be to some extent prepared to react and to put in place actions for victims in case of insecurity. So it is within this perspective that the MULIKA UBAKAJI campaign consortium is operating and is working and is looking ahead to to discourage this kind of behavior by bringing perpetrators to be accountable. They have to be accountable, and they have to be, if considered responsible, convicted. So thank you very much to all of you, and we count on your support as well.
Worst case scenario and the status quo scenario. And by this we mean the best case scenario is a scenario where if everything goes well, what do we expect to see? And from the discussions, it was like, it's kind of a dream, because that has never happened, and should it happen, maybe it will be a first time that we are having the best case scenario, where there are no disputed elections, where there is no violence before, during and after, where people just accept results without disputing, where people live as Kenyans, even when they differ politically. Then the worst case scenario is where we had a scenario of when there's a lot of chaos, people don't accept the results, there's a lot of political rivalry, and it's really hot. And then the status quo is where things are just 50-50. 50-50. So it's not bad, it's not good, it's just there in between. And out of those scenarios, we got a number of findings, because there were many discussions after that based on what we saw. And some of the things that came out are that during this period, there's a need, an increase in the need for safe houses for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. This is because sexual and gender-based violence tends to increase during this period, and a lot of people said it could be because the environment makes it easy even for perpetrators, because there's a lot of tension and a lot of focus on the process other than also this other thing. And then access to essential services would be a challenge for survivors of sexual gender-based violence. This is because of course, limitations in transport system, and also essential service providers have been targeted in the past, and so some of them will have moved, because we also saw that there's going to be mass movement from this place, the Nairobi, to up country by most people. Yeah, so a lot of survivors will not access the support that they need. Again, closure of schools might affect the children, and as you know, when children are at home, like for example during the COVID, we had a lot of cases of defilement, and so such are just the things that came out of this. But we also tried to see what we could do, and we said as MULIKA UBAKAJI we need to engage partners who work beyond what we do, particularly on elections. And we chose 4 to start with, and initiated the engagement through letters of introduction, where we wrote to them and shared what our scenario mapping exercise was like and what came out of it. So we communicated with Kenya National Human Rights Commission, and they were very positive about this engagement, and we are planning to have meetings with them. We started some work with NCIC, that is National Cohesion and Integration Commission. They have peace monitors on the ground, and they have invited MULIKA UBAKAJI to meet these peace monitors and see if we can have come up with measures to mitigate. We've also approached NGEK. NGEK is National Gender and Equality Commission. They were very positive about this also, and they are already having meetings of their own, but have invited MULIKA UBAKAJI to be with them and also have some joint activities that focus towards changing the narrative of SGBV. Yeah, the other one was IEBC. IEBC have also expressed interest in working with MULIKA UBAKAJI, and moving forward, they also meant to have a meeting to discuss our future collaborations. So this is just to show you that we are not working as MULIKA UBAKAJI alone, but we've engaged other people beyond what we are doing. This scenario mapping report will have an official launch later that will be communicated, and so we'll also invite you media people again.
Thank you very much, Florence. Thank you so much. For more information on the scenario mapping, you can contact Florence. Now we welcome the third speaker to talk about the psychosocial support. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning once more. My name is Salima Njoki Macharia. I work with the Women Human Rights Defenders, what's called the Hub. I think I want to start from, just thanking the President for the initiative of opening up a mental health facility in Ngong, but also to tell him that a mental facility is not enough. When you talk about issues of mental health, you're talking about community care, because that's where the violations happen. So in regards to the campaign, and I think the previous speakers, Admoso Alberto, spoke of the challenges that they face. Stigma, fear, all those are reasons why maybe they don't come up and report such cases. So mine is just to talk about briefly on the mental well-being, the psychological disturbance that they go through, and just to call upon all of us, because
I think I was saying when someone is violated, and more so when it comes to rape and defilement, what you normally take away from that person is worth and their dignity. And that's why they come up, they don't come up to report because of the shame, the guilt, and then also our community, because we also have expectations towards, or even how we talk around and about people who've been violated. So mine is just here not to share a survivor's experience, because again, I'm under oath, and also I respect my ethics as a counselor psychologist, not to speak deeply into what the survivors specifically will go through, but just to give you a general overview of their psychological disturbance. You've seen issues of depression, suicide, emanating from the act that happened to them once upon a time. Number two, you'll also realize the perpetrators, maybe at one point, they were also violated. So we're talking about a cycle of rape and defilement. Maybe they came from those families that something happened to them, and that's why they realize this is the way and the order of life, and they must do that. Others is out of vengeance, maybe resentment, and that's why they want to do that. So for us as MULIKA UBAKAJI, we want to look at issues of mental health to the survivors, but also to the perpetrators, because we also have to understand why they do what they do. Maybe they just come from also dysfunctional families, or maybe at one point they were violated and they knew that is a way to go. So mine also is a call to all of us, when we talk about community care, we have to start from home. I know maybe the government is doing something around and about issues of mental health, but I think we have also to be so intentional and deliberate when you talk about specific victims and perpetrators of rape and defilement. So we have to start from home, from families. And I'm also a believer, behind every behavior, there's a story. There's a story of the perpetrator. There's a story of the person who's been violated. Then for us, the media fraternity, ours is a call to you. People tend to believe your stories, but how they are told also is important for the healing process of these survivors. How you tell those stories. Can we also humanize the people who go through these atrocities? Because behind the stories is a person, is a human being, is a parent, is a mother. So how you tell these stories again will help not only for the victims to get justice, but also you'll help them into their healing process. So we call upon you, one, so that you can help them bring these stories to the world, but again, how you tell them, it's also critical. So we also call you just to be a little bit sensitive. I know sometimes we have demands from our editors, we have demands from the community to tell these stories, but can we try at least and become a little bit sensitive? As much as you're getting your story, how are you leaving that victim? Are you leaving them better or worse than you found them? I'd rather you don't air the story, but at least you dignify that person. Because the more you tell these stories and how you tell them can either hinder their healing or help them heal. We don't want issues where victims are scared to come out because they're scared when they tell their stories, then they're re-traumatized. And we've seen this. We've seen a lot of media trolls of someone who shared their story of what happened, and then the next thing we had, they were trolled or their stories was gotten out of context. We can avoid issues of depression and suicide to this victim if we just dignify those stories. And it's saddening now that in the country, I think we are a number 4 in the continent, and then number 9 in the world when it comes to issues of depressions. But we have to ask ourselves, where are those issues coming from? It is from us, it is from the community, it is from the media. Because of how, again, we treat these victims and survivors of SGBV. So I'm just speaking from a very point of asking and humility, just for us, because we're here as a media people, and I know this story will go out. Yours is a story, but theirs is a life. Where do you strike the balance?
To increase convictions. And if we say increasing convictions, we can only increase convictions if all the mechanisms are put at stake and they're working so very well. What am I talking about? I'm talking about for us to increase convictions, we have the issue of prevention on issues of gender-based violence. We have the issues of response, we have the issues of mitigation measures, we have the issues of partnerships. And everybody understanding their roles and doing their roles as expected. If that is done, definitely will increase convictions and gender-based violence will reduce. And that's our mission and our objective as MULIKA UBAKAJI. Just touching on what my colleagues have said. So our call for the state and government is, we're not saying that the government is not doing much. The government has really done so much in issues of gender-based violence in terms of the prevention and response. And we're just calling on them to, I'll say improve or emphasize or work on some areas like the issue of legal aid support for the survivors. The state should provide legal address and legal aid for the survivors, just representation of the survivors in court. That one is not so much there. So we call upon the state to at least increase and support and do so much here. And even there's one that the NMS came up with the other day. But they should, you see, when it comes to election and we normally have so many cases of sexual gender-based violence, and there is need for safe shelters, protection and care for those survivors. So increased budgetary allocations for safe houses and offer response initiatives. That is something that the state should also uphold and do. The third initiative is having a specialized courts for SGBV survivors. I'll say we're seeing that when we are countries that have that one-stop GBV intervention point, where we are having the medical, the police, the court at one-stop center, we've seen cases really going so very fast. That maybe having a court that is handling criminal cases and also handling sexual gender-based violence cases. So we are calling on the government to at least have specialized courts for sexual gender-based violence and other gender-based violence cases. This will increase convictions, because we are seeing that we're having cases as far as 207, the other elections that are still in court. We are asking ourselves why. They will tell you that we have so many cases, the criminal cases and other cases, and so maybe to curb that, we're calling on the state to at least get a specialized court for sexual gender-based violence and other GBV for the survivors. Thank you. Thank you, Maggie. Last but not least, we have Naomi, who will give us the final remarks. Thank you.
Habari zenu. Some of us tukiwekwa kwa hii kitu, mumesema sasa tu nywele tu ndio ionekane. But that's okay. Thank you so much for allowing me this time, and thank you so much to the members of the Fourth Estate. We really thank you for being here, because we think that MULIKA UBAKAJI is not complete without the Fourth Estate. Why? Because Ubakaji, defilement and rape, is something that can befall anyone. It cuts across social status, age, religion, creed, and everything. So we are all potential victims, survivors of rape here, because we don't have a kid, they're not defilement, but all of us in the room are potential survivors or victims of rape. And that's why it is so urgent for all of us to be part of this discourse. I just want to start by saying that Kenya is a signatory to international and regional treaties that outlaw rape and defilement, but also that provides standards for response and mitigation, especially as far as state obligations are concerned. Kenya has also ratified and domesticated the same treaties locally, from the Constitution of Kenya 2010 to the Sexual Offences 206, Sexual Offences Act 206, to many other. I looked at the number of local laws in this country that touch on sexual violence, especially rape and defilement, and I didn't exhaust the laws, but I at least counted 9 of them. I will not name all of them, but for example, we have the Children's Act 2001. We have the Labor Relations Act that outlaws sexual harassment and obligates employers to have sexual harassment policies. We have I forget the others, but there was, at least I stopped at 7. And so we have the legal framework that protects people against sexual and gender-based violence. Unfortunately, in this country, especially in moments of crisis like we saw during Corona, there was an escalation of SGBV, especially rape and defilement. Usually women and children are the most targeted. And I'll say this because we are going into another crisis, and if 207 is anything to go by, we saw the numbers we saw the numbers of the statistics, and Salima has told us that behind the statistics there's a face. We saw the statistics in 2007, and looking at the volatility, the electoral volatility in 2022, it calls for all of us. It calls for all of us to be attentive, to be, cautious, but also to be very careful, because it doesn't look good. And from the scenario mapping that Florence has shared with us, then it clearly, we already are seeing a lot of red flags. There are red flags all over. And if you were to just go to Machakos country bus, that one, the one that takes us to Shago, Machakos and Western and wherever else, and just look at the number of people, the exodus of people going to the countryside, as in people, watu wanahama, you will see beds, you will see mitungi, you will see any people are going home, and mainly from the slums, because they have the history of 207. And so this is something that calls us to appeal to the members of the press to be very attentive, because we found a role for the members of the press in MULIKA UBAKAJI, and especially during the electoral period. And if I was to just clearly outline what we thought that the members of the fourth estate would be useful for, is number one, we are seeking to shape a new narrative around SGBV, around rape and defilement. And we think that this narrative is not going to be complete without you people playing a role in shaping this narrative. Because number one, rape and defilement has been used as a weapon of war. And we saw how and we continue to see how rape is weaponized around crisis times. I've talked about COVID time, I've talked about 207. We are seeing it already now happening. You hear in Soweto, I don't know how many people have been sexually violated. You hear in Kibera, you hear in Mathare, and we spoke to people, and people said, these things are already happening. So we also want to see the media monitoring the behavior of police. How will police be responding? In 2007, police also happen to become perpetrators. Are they going to be perpetrators this time round? Or are they going to be state officers who are here to respect, to protect, and to fulfill the rights of people in this country? We think that you have a key role in helping us do that. And then we also think that the visibility of that is very critical, and you have the power, you hold the power, the camera and the pen to do that. Exposing perpetrators, powerful perpetrators, the big shots. If, for example, God forbid, I'm raped by an OCS, where do I report? How does this become public? The media, you have the power to help us in this. And then, of course, in your reporting and your coverage, you've been reporting on electoral malpractices. You've been reporting on electoral crimes. Is it possible for you to intersectionalize this? Bring the whole issue of SGBV, bring in the whole issue of sexual crimes, rape and defilement, and other SGBVs in your reporting, especially during this period of election. And of course, we think that you're going to be very critical in helping us in contributing in holding the state accountable. The reason why I started by outlining the treaties, the international treaties like CEDAW, the International Covenant on Civil Political Rights, International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which are international treaties that Kenya is a signatory to. It has signed, it has ratified, it has, domesticated. Then they need to do what they ought to do by what they're obligated to do. And so you, as the fourth estate, you have a role to cover and show how intentional is the state when it comes to preventing and responding to aspects of SGBV in this country, and more urgently, during the electoral period 2022, because I said it doesn't look so good. Thank you so much. So I've been asked to respond to question 2 and 3. But I prefer responding to question 1 and 3, and then I'll ask Maggie to respond to question 2 on how many cases are still pending in court from 2007. How many cases have we taken to court since we launched the campaign? And what's the progress so far? I'll start by saying that MULIKA UBAKAJI campaign is a campaign that is a multifaceted strategy campaign. So we not only use litigation as our strategy, we use litigation, we use media engagement as a tactic. We use community public awareness as another strategy. We use lobbying and advocacy, or directly interacting and engaging duty bearers, and that's why you heard Florence talking about the constitutional accountability mechanisms that we've been engaging. And for that reason, we also use research as a tactic. So for that reason, we did not start with the litigation, because we want to be able to build evidence and concrete evidence, because we want to go to court with something that we can say that this is really empirical evidence that we can present. So we haven't, so far from we launched the campaign, presented any case. And we're not going to be presenting individual cases. We have members of the consortium, like Center for Rights and Education on Women. We have Wangu Kanja in the consortium and in the room. We have Katiba Institute that are also in the room, and members of the consortium that do everyday cases of survivors. But the approach you're going to take on litigation in this consortium, in this campaign, is going to be public interest litigation, because we want to seek to influence policy and law in this country, and actually behavior of the government on how they handle survivors. So we will not be taking every other case that comes up, and that's why for us research is very important. What is that one case that will represent the whole country if we take to court? And so because of that, we are still doing research. And once we have very, very concrete research, we will go to court with public interest litigation. And public interest litigation, you know, has to be supported heavily by research. So that is what we are doing at the moment. And hopefully in our second year, we will go to court with a public interest litigation. We'll have understood where a policy or legislative gap exists. And on the third question on red alert is the issue of where. So MULIKA UBAKAJI is a national campaign. Our members of MULIKA work in the whole country, in the 47 counties, but we decided to start with a few counties, and we have gotten interest in Mombasa, Wajir, Nairobi, Kiambu. We have Kajiado? I don't remember very well to begin with, but this scenario mapping exercise was done in 6 slums in Nairobi only. So we did not go to the entire country, neither did we go to the priority counties to begin with. So we did it in we did it in Mathare, we did it in Mailisaba, we did it in Mukuru, Kawangware, Langata, and Kibera. So 6 slums in this country. And in all those 6 slums in Nairobi, and in all these 6 slums, there were many hotspot areas that were identified. We have a document which is not here that outlines the areas that were identified as hotspots for that matter, but it's purely in 6 slums in Nairobi. Thank you so much. Maggie, you want to come and respond to the second one?
Of cases still pending at court since 2007. We even have cases as far as 2017 still pending in court. You just know the legal process in Kenya, the way it takes like forever. That is just the way in which they work. And they will give reasons as we have so many other cases to attend to, the criminal cases. That's why I was talking about the one-stop GBV intervention point and having specialized courts for cases of gender-based violence. So I'll say we're having like survivors who still get back to us and tell us our cases are still in court. That's the reason why you're saying their cases still in court. When they're coming to present other cases, they'll say their cases are still pending in court. So when it comes to statistics, maybe we'll share later the statistics. Yeah, that's what I can say about that. Are you answered?